Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship had been traveling for 6 months, deeper into space than any human had ever gone before. Earth was now just a distant memory, a small blue dot lost among billions of other stars. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange," said Chief Science Officer Lisa Campbell from her station. She was staring at her computer screen with a puzzled look on her face. "There are energy readings coming from the Kepler 442 system that don't match anything we've seen before." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data scrolling across the screen. The numbers made no sense to him, but Lisa was the smartest person he knew when it came to space science. If she said something was strange, then it was worth investigating. "How far out are we from that system?" Jake asked. "About 2 days at current speed," Lisa replied. "The energy signatures are definitely artificial. Someone built whatever is generating these readings." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. The possibility of finding other intelligent life had always been the dream of every space explorer. But now that it might actually be happening, he wasn't sure if he was excited or terrified. "Change course for Kepler 442, he ordered, "and send a message back to Earth letting them know what we found." The next 2 days passed slowly. Every crew member on the ship knew they might be about to make the most important discovery in human history. Jake barely slept, spending most of his time on the bridge watching the screens and thinking about what they might find. When they finally arrived at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, what they found was beyond anything they had imagined. Floating in space near the system's outer planets were massive structures that looked like they had been grown rather than built. The surfaces were smooth and curved, with no visible seams or joints. They were beautiful in a way that human architecture could never be. "Commander, we're being scanned," reported Navigation Officer Amy Rodriguez. "Something is looking us over pretty thoroughly." Before Jake could respond, a new voice filled the bridge. It spoke perfect English, but there was something odd about the tone that made it clear the speaker was not human. "Unknown vessel, you are entering Zephyrian Trade Consortium space. State your origin and purpose." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. We come from the planet Earth in peaceful exploration. We mean no harm and seek only knowledge and friendship." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "Earth. Yes, we are aware of your species. Prepare to receive a diplomatic party. Do not attempt to leave this area or take any aggressive action." An hour later, a small ship approached the horizon. It was unlike anything humans had ever built, moving through space without any visible propulsion system. It docked with their ship so smoothly that Jake barely felt the connection. The airlock opened and Ambassador Kethvar stepped onto the human ship. He was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of crystal. His movements were graceful, but somehow mechanical, as if he was not quite comfortable in a physical body. "Commander Morrison," the alien said with what might have been a smile. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. We have been watching your species for some time, waiting for you to develop the ability to travel between stars." Jake tried to hide his surprise. "You've been watching us?" "Of course. We monitor all developing civilizations in this part of the galaxy. Your species shows promise, though you have many obvious weaknesses that will need to be addressed." The word stung, but Jake kept his expression neutral. "What kind of weaknesses?" Kethvar walked around the bridge, examining the human technology with what looked like amusement. "Your bodies are fragile. Your emotions make you unpredictable. Your tendency toward violence and conflict makes you dangerous to yourselves and others. But these are common problems among young species. They can be managed." "Managed?" Jake asked. "The consortium has maintained peace in this galaxy for over 3,000 of your years. We have learned how to help primitive species find their proper place in galactic civilization. You will be offered membership in our trade network, where you can contribute according to your abilities." Jake didn't like the sound of that, but he tried to remain diplomatic. "What would our role be in this network?" "Your species is physically strong compared to most consortium members, and you breed quickly. You would be valuable for mining operations, construction work, and other manual labor. In return, you would receive protection and access to basic trade goods. The more Kethvar talked, the more Jake realized that this alien didn't see humans as equals. To him, they were just another primitive species to be managed and controlled. "I appreciate your offer," Jake said carefully, "but I would need to discuss this with my government before making any decisions." Kethvar seemed surprised by this response. "Very well. You have 30 solar cycles to consult with your leaders. I am confident they will see the wisdom of accepting our generous terms." After the alien left, Jake called his senior officers, together in the briefing room. The mood was tense as everyone tried to process what had just happened. "Did anyone else get the feeling that he was talking down to us?" asked Engineer Pete Sullivan. "Like we were children who couldn't take care of ourselves," added Amy Rodriguez. Lisa Campbell had been quiet during the meeting with the alien, but now she spoke up. "I got a good look at their technology while he was here. Some of it is impressive, but a lot of it is actually less advanced than what we have on Earth." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Their computer systems are slower than ours. Their power generation is less efficient. Their ship design is pretty, but our engines could probably outrun theirs in a straight race." Pete nodded. "I noticed the same thing. Their faster-than-light communication system has lag times that our quantum entanglement network eliminated years ago." Jake felt a cold realization settling in. The aliens weren't offering to help humanity because they were generous. They were offering to help because they wanted to control a species that might actually be more advanced than they were. "We need to get back to Earth," Jake said. "And we need to make sure our government understands exactly what kind of situation we're dealing with." The journey home took 3 weeks. During that time, Jake and his crew worked together to analyze everything they had learned about the consortium. The more they studied the alien technology and social structure, the more they realized that humanity was walking into a trap. When they finally reached Earth, Jake went straight to the Global Space Council headquarters in Geneva. President Helen Carter was waiting for him, along with the most important leaders from every nation on Earth. "Commander Morrison," President Carter said, "your preliminary report was quite disturbing. Tell us everything." Jake spent the next 4 hours explaining what they had discovered. He told them about the consortium's rigid hierarchy, their attitude toward younger species, and their apparent plan to use humanity as manual labor. "The question," Jake concluded, "is whether we accept their offer and become junior members of their organization, or whether we try to forge our own path in the galaxy." General Rick Barnes, the military advisor, spoke first. "If they have technology that's 3,000 years ahead of ours, we might not have much choice." "But that's just it," Jake replied. "Their technology isn't that far ahead of ours. In some areas, we're actually more advanced than they are." Dr. Claire Thompson, the chief scientist, leaned forward in her chair. "Are you suggesting we could compete with them?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we don't need their protection as much as they want us to think we do." President Carter was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "We have 30 days to give them an answer. I want every department working on this problem. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we make a decision that will affect the future of our entire species." As the meeting broke up, Jake looked out the window at the lights of Earth cities. Somewhere out there among the stars, the aliens were waiting for humanity's response. They expected humans to gratefully accept a subservient role in their galactic empire. They were about to be very surprised. 3 months had passed since Commander Jake Morrison returned to Earth with news of the alien contact. The planet had been busy preparing for the arrival of the Zephyrian delegation. Every major city had emergency meetings. Scientists worked day and night studying the alien technology samples that Jake had brought back. Military leaders planned for every possible outcome. President Helen Carter stood in the command center beneath Washington, watching the screens that showed space around Earth. Today was the day the aliens would arrive to hear humanity's answer to their offer of membership in the trade consortium. "Madam President, we have visual contact," reported Colonel Mark Davis from the tracking station. "It's bigger than we expected." On the main screen, a massive ship appeared among the stars. The Eternal Unity was 10 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Its crystal-like surface caught the light from the sun and threw it back in rainbow patterns that were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "They certainly know how to make an impression," muttered General Rick Barnes. Ambassador Kethvar's voice filled the command center through the communication system. "People of Earth, I have returned as promised. I bring with me representatives from all 7 species of the consortium. We are ready to welcome you into galactic civilization, isn't it?" Carter picked up the microphone. "Ambassador Kethvar, welcome back to our solar system. We are honored by your visit and look forward to showing you what humanity has accomplished." There was a pause before Kethvar responded, and when he did, there was surprise in his voice. "You wish to show us your accomplishments? That is unusual. Most species are eager to learn from us first. We believe that understanding comes from sharing knowledge in both directions," Carter replied smoothly. An hour later, shuttles from the alien ship landed at Luna Base, humanity's largest facility on the moon. Dr. Ben Harris, Earth's lead engineer, waited to greet the delegation. Behind him stood the pride of human engineering, a sprawling complex of domes and towers that housed over 50,000 people. The aliens emerged from their shuttles in a group that looked like something from a dream. Ambassador Kethvar was there with his crystal skin, but he was joined by others that were even more strange. General Vextor of the Korath looked like a walking suit of armor made from black metal. Scholar Prime Yelnathi of the Veltai had tentacles instead of arms and eyes that glowed with inner light. Most unsettling of all was the Flux representative, Zarian, who appeared to be made of pure energy, barely contained in a roughly human shape. "Welcome to Luna Base," Dr. Harris said, trying not to stare at the energy being. "We're excited to show you what we've built here." The tour began in the main habitat domes, where human families lived and worked in the low gravity of the moon. The aliens seemed confused by what they saw. "Your people choose to live in such harsh conditions?" asked Scholar Prime Yelnathi. "We don't see it as harsh," Dr. Harris replied. "We see it as an opportunity. The low gravity lets us build structures that would be impossible on Earth. The vacuum of space gives us perfect conditions for manufacturing certain materials." They moved through the manufacturing sections, where human workers created everything, from computer components to spacecraft parts. The aliens watched in silence as massive 3D printers built entire ship hulls in zero gravity, creating designs that were lighter and stronger than anything that could be made on a planet. General Vextor stopped in front of one of the printers. "How long does it take to build a warship using this method?" "About 2 weeks for a frigate-class vessel," Dr. Harris answered. 3 weeks for a cruiser." The Korath general exchanged glances with Ambassador Kethvar. In their civilization, building a single warship took months or even years. The real surprise came when they reached the defense center. Captain Kate Adams was waiting for them, dressed in the blue uniform of the Earth Defense Force. She was a small woman with short blonde hair, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Captain Adams will demonstrate our planetary defense system," Dr. Harris announced. Kethvar looked amused. "Your defensive capabilities are certainly of interest, though I suspect they are quite primitive compared to consortium standards." Captain Adams smiled. "We'll see about that. With your permission, I'd like to show you how we handle incoming threats." She led them to an observation deck that looked out over the lunar surface. In the distance, they could see what looked like a small moon floating in space above them. "That's Defense Platform 7, Captain Adams explained. "One of 12 platforms that protect Earth and the inner solar system." She pressed a button on her control panel. Instantly, the platform fired a bright beam of energy that struck a target asteroid several thousand kilometers away. But instead of destroying the asteroid, something unexpected happened. The platform seemed to absorb the energy from the impact and grow brighter. "I don't understand," said General Vextor. "Your weapon failed to destroy the target." "That wasn't a weapon," Captain Adams replied. "That was our power collection system. You see, we learned long ago that the best defense isn't destroying your enemies. It's making their attacks work for you instead of against you." She pressed another button. This time, the asteroid was struck by what the aliens assumed would be a devastating attack. But instead of being destroyed, the asteroid began to change. Its surface turned green as plants started growing across it. Within minutes, what had been dead rock was becoming a garden world. The aliens stared in shock. This was impossible by everything they knew about warfare and technology. "Your defensive system converts attacks into power?" asked Scholar Prime Yelnathi. "And into raw materials for terraforming," Captain Adams confirmed. "When someone shoots at us, they're actually helping us build new worlds." Ambassador Kethvar was no longer smiling. "This is not how galactic warfare works. Species develop planet-killing weapons to ensure mutual destruction. That maintains peace." "We tried a different approach," Captain Adams said. "Instead of building weapons that could destroy worlds, we built systems that could create them. Instead of making our enemies afraid to attack us, we made it pointless for them to attack us." Commander Steve Parker of the Earth Defense Force joined the group. He was a tall man with graying hair who had spent his entire career thinking about how to protect humanity from threats they couldn't yet imagine. "The captain is being modest," he said. "Our real breakthrough came when we realized that the best way to defend against unknown threats is to be able to adapt to anything. We don't try to build bigger weapons than our enemies. We build systems that can turn any weapon into something useful." To demonstrate his point, Commander Parker activated a holographic display that showed the solar system. Hundreds of human ships were visible, moving between the planets and asteroid belt. But these weren't warships. They were terraforming vessels, mining ships, and research platforms. "In the time it takes most civilizations to build one dreadnought, we can convert a dozen dead worlds into places where people can live," Parker explained. "We don't conquer territory, we create it." The aliens watched as one of the human terraforming ships approached a barren planet in the outer system. In real time, they could see the ship releasing clouds of engineered bacteria and atmospheric processors. Within hours, the planet's dead surface was showing signs of life. "Impossible," whispered General Vextor. "Terraforming takes centuries. We have worlds that have been under development for 1,000 years and are still not habitable." "Different approach," Commander Parker said simply. "We don't try to impose our will on a planet. We adapt ourselves and our technology to work with what's already there." By the end of the day, the alien delegation was very quiet. They had come to Earth, expecting to find a primitive species grateful for their guidance. Instead, they had found a civilization that thought about problems in ways that were completely foreign to their experience. That evening, Ambassador Kethvar requested a private meeting with President Carter. They met in the lunar conference room, with Earth hanging in the sky above them like a blue jewel. "President Carter," Kethvar began, "I must admit that your species has surprised us. Your technological capabilities are more advanced than we anticipated." "Thank you," Carter replied carefully. "However, this presents us with a problem. The consortium has maintained peace for 3,000 years through a careful balance of power. Each species has its role, its place in the hierarchy. Your approach to technology and warfare, it could upset that balance." President Carter leaned back in her chair. "Are you saying that our defensive capabilities are a threat to galactic peace?" "I'm saying that your way of thinking is dangerous. You see opportunities where others see limitations. You create where others destroy. This kind of thinking has led to the collapse of previous galactic civilizations. And maybe that's why those civilizations collapsed," Carter replied. "Maybe they fell because they stopped growing, stopped adapting, stopped looking for new solutions to old problems." Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was troubled. "We came here to offer you membership in our organization. Now, I'm not sure if you want to join us or if you're planning to replace us." President Carter smiled. "Ambassador, we're not interested in replacing anyone. We're interested in partnership. Real partnership. Wherever news of humanity's unusual capabilities spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of the delegation's return from Earth, every major world in the consortium was talking about the strange new species that turned weapons into power and built worlds instead of destroying them." Dr. Sarah Mitchell found herself at the center of this galactic storm. As Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, She had arrived at the consortium capital expecting to negotiate humanity's place in an established order. Instead, she discovered that her presence was causing that order to crumble. The consortium capital was built inside a hollow asteroid that had been converted into a massive space station. Millions of beings from 7 different species lived and worked in its tunnels and chambers. The architecture was impressive but cold, designed to show power rather than welcome visitors. Sarah's first meeting was with Chancellor Volmesh, the Zephyrian leader who had ruled the consortium for over 200 years. He was older than Ambassador Kethvar, with crystal skin that had turned deep blue with age. His office was at the center of the station, surrounded by layers of security that made it clear he was not used to being challenged. Ambassador Mitchell, Volmesh said without greeting, "Your species has created a significant problem for galactic stability." Sarah remained calm, though she could feel the tension in the room. "How so, Chancellor?" "For 3,000 years, the consortium has maintained peace through a simple principle. Each species knows its place and stays in it. The strong protect the weak serve the strong, and everyone benefits from the arrangement." "And where exactly is humanity's place in this system?" Sarah asked. Volmesh gestured to a holographic display that showed the galaxy's political structure. It looked like a pyramid, with the Zephyrians at the top, the other founding species in the middle, and dozens of client species at the bottom. "Your species would naturally fit here," he pointed to the bottom level, "providing physical labor and basic resources in exchange for protection and guidance." Sarah studied the display. "What happens to species that don't want to fit into this pyramid?" "They learn to fit, or they are made to fit," Volmesh replied coldly. Before Sarah could respond, an aide rushed into the office with urgent news. "Chancellor, we have a situation in the Korath system. General Vextor has requested immediate consultation with the human ambassador." Volmesh looked annoyed. "What does a Korath general want with a human?" The answer came when they connected to the Korath homeworld. General Vextor appeared on the communication screen, but he looked different than he had on Luna Base. Instead of the confident warrior they had met before, he seemed troubled and uncertain. "Ambassador Mitchell," he began, "I need to ask you about something your species calls conflict resolution. Our traditional methods are not working and our people are confused." Sarah leaned forward. "What kind of conflict are you dealing with, General?" "A rebellion in the outer colonies. Normally, we would crush it with overwhelming force. But since visiting your world, some of our commanders are asking if there might be another way. They want to try negotiation instead of warfare." Chancellor Volmesh looked horrified. "General, the Korath have been the military arm of the consortium for 1,000 years. Your role is to maintain order through strength, not to negotiate with rebels. But what if the rebels have legitimate concerns?" Vextor asked. "What if crushing them only creates more rebels? The humans showed us that defense can be more effective than attack. Perhaps diplomacy can be more effective than warfare." Sarah seized the opportunity. "General, would you like me to send some human negotiators to help with the situation?" "Yes," Vextor replied immediately. "We want to learn your methods." Chancellor Volmesh cut the communication before Sarah could respond. His crystal skin was now glowing with anger. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said. "Your species doesn't just bring new technology. You bring new ideas that undermine the stability we have worked so hard to create." Sarah stood up from her chair. "Chancellor, with respect, maybe stability isn't the same thing as stagnation. Maybe the reason your civilization has stopped growing is because you've stopped questioning whether your old methods are still the best methods." Before Volmesh could respond, another message arrived. This time it was from the Veltai homeworld. Scholar Prime Yelnathi appeared on the screen, and her tentacles were writhing with excitement. "Ambassador Mitchell, we have made an incredible discovery working with the research data your people shared with us. We have found a way to help species adapt to environments that were previously impossible to survive in." Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful news, Scholar Prime. But we need human researchers to work with us directly. Your approach to biological adaptation is completely different from ours. Where we try to change the environment to suit the species, you change the species to suit the environment. Together, we could revolutionize medicine for the entire galaxy. Again, Volmesh cut the communication. You see what's happening? Your influence is spreading like a disease through our civilization. Species that have followed our guidance for millennia are suddenly questioning everything. Maybe they should question everything, Sarah replied. Maybe that's how civilizations grow and improve. Over the following days, Sarah received more requests from across the galaxy. The energy beings called the Flux wanted to work with human engineers to create new types of space drives. Mining species from the outer rim wanted to learn human, terraforming techniques. Even some younger Zephyrians were secretly asking about human political systems that gave individuals more freedom. The breakthrough that changed everything came when engineer Danny Clark arrived from Earth to work with Zarian, the Flux entity they had met on Luna Base. Together, they created something that nobody had thought possible, a space drive that could exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Sarah was present for the first test of the new drive. The experimental ship appeared to be in normal space, but also seemed to flicker in and out of existence like a ghost. How does it work? She asked Danny. The Flux showed us how to manipulate energy in ways we never imagined, Danny explained. And we showed them how to make that manipulation stable and controllable. The ship isn't just moving through space anymore. It's moving through several different layers of reality at once. Zarian's energy form pulsed with what might have been excitement. This technology could revolutionize space travel. Ships could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. We could explore regions that were previously unreachable. The implications were staggering. If ships could travel between dimensions, then the old barriers that had kept different parts of the galaxy isolated would disappear. Species that had never met before would suddenly be neighbors. The rigid control structure that the consortium depended on would become impossible to maintain. Chancellor Volmesh arrived at the test facility within hours, accompanied by a full security detail. He looked at the flickering ship with obvious fear. "This technology is too dangerous to be allowed," he declared. "I am ordering all research to stop immediately." "You can't stop scientific progress," Sarah replied. "The knowledge already exists. Other species are already working on their own versions of the technology. Then we will confiscate all research materials and restrict access to the relevant species." Danny Clark stepped forward. "Chancellor, you're missing the point. This isn't about any one technology. It's about a completely different way of thinking about problems. You can confiscate our research, but you can't confiscate the idea that there might be better ways to do things." As if to prove his point, another message arrived. This time it was from Captain Roy Jackson, who was leading the first joint human-alien expedition to the galactic core. His excited voice filled the facility. "Sarah, you need to see what we've found out here. The ruins aren't just old buildings. They're a message from whatever civilization was here before the consortium, and that message changes everything we thought we knew about galactic history." The transmission included images of massive structures that were clearly built by someone, with technology far beyond anything the current galaxy possessed. But the most important discovery wasn't the buildings themselves. It was the records they contained. There have been at least 12 different galactic civilizations before the current one, Captain Jackson reported, each one more advanced than the last. But they all collapsed for the same reason. They stopped growing. They stopped adapting. They became so focused on maintaining their existing power structures that they forgot how to change when change was necessary. The records showed a pattern that repeated over millions of years. Civilizations would rise, reach a peak of power and stability, and then slowly decline as they became more rigid and resistant to new ideas. Eventually, they would collapse entirely, leaving only ruins for the next civilization to find. Sarah looked at Chancellor Volmesh. "Don't you see? This is exactly what's happening to the consortium. You've become so focused on maintaining control that you've stopped growing. And if you stop growing, you'll eventually collapse just like all the civilizations before you." Volmesh was. Dr. Frank Miller stood among the ancient ruins at the galactic core, trying to understand what his team had discovered. The structures around him were older than any civilization currently known to exist. The metal they were made from didn't match anything in the periodic table. The writing on the walls told a story that would change how every species in the galaxy thought about their place in the universe. "Professor Miller, you need to see this," called out Dr. Lisa Green from deeper in the ruins. She was standing in front of a wall covered with symbols that seemed to move and shift when you looked at them directly. Frank walked over to where Lisa was working. She had connected her translation computer to the alien writing system, and words were appearing on her screen faster than she could read them. "What does it say?" Frank asked. "It's a warning," Lisa replied, her voice filled with worry. "The civilization that built this place left a message for whoever came after them. They're telling us about something called the hegemony." Before Frank could ask more questions, alarms started blaring throughout their research camp. Captain Roy Jackson's voice came over the communication system, urgent and scared. "All teams return to base immediately. We have unknown ships approaching our position. They're not broadcasting any identification signals." Frank and Lisa ran back to the main camp, where the rest of the research team was already gathering. Through the transparent dome that protected them from the harsh environment of space, they could see ships approaching that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The ships were black as space itself, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it. They moved without any visible engines, sliding through space like hunting animals stalking their prey. There were dozens of them, and more were appearing every minute. "Captain Jackson," Frank called out, "the ruins contain information about these ships. They belong to something called the hegemony. According to the records, they're from the outer rim of the galaxy." "What do they want?" Jackson asked. Before Frank could answer, the lead ship fired a weapon that made reality itself seem to twist and bend. The space around their research station shimmered like water, and suddenly half of their equipment simply stopped existing. "They're not here to talk," Jackson said grimly. "All ships prepare for emergency jump back to consortium space. But when they tried to activate their faster-than-light drives, nothing happened. The hegemony ships had somehow locked them in place using technology that the consortium had never encountered before. Meanwhile, on the consortium capital, Chancellor Volmesh was dealing with his own crisis. The rebellion that had started in the Korath system was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. Entire species were declaring independence from consortium rule. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years was falling apart. "Chancellor, we have an emergency transmission from the Galactic Core," reported his aide. "It's from the Joint Research Expedition." Captain Jackson's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the research station was shaking as more hegemony weapons struck their shields. "Chancellor, we are under attack by an unknown force. They have technology that far exceeds anything in consortium records. We need immediate military assistance." Volmesh felt his world crumbling around him. "How many ships do they have?" "Hundreds, and more are arriving every hour. Their weapons can destroy matter at the atomic level. Our shields won't hold much longer." Volmesh turned to his military advisors. "How long would it take to assemble a response fleet?" "At least 2 weeks to gather ships from across consortium space," replied Admiral Kolvash. "But sir, if their technology is as advanced as reported, our standard tactics may not be effective." On Earth, Admiral Beth Collins was in an emergency meeting with President Carter and the military leadership. The news from the Galactic Core had reached them through the quantum communication network that linked all human settlements. "What do we know about this hegemony?" President Carter asked. "According to the data from the ruins, they're descendants of the 12th galactic civilization," reported Dr. Claire Thompson. "When that civilization collapsed, some of their population retreated to the outer rim and continued developing their technology in isolation." General Rick Barnes studied the tactical reports. "Their ships can phase in and out of normal space. They can destroy matter by manipulating fundamental forces. Traditional weapons and defenses are useless against them." "What about our adaptive defense systems?" Admiral Collins asked. "Unknown. We've never faced technology this advanced before." President Carter was quiet for a moment. "Admiral Collins, I want you to take our fastest ships to the Galactic Core, work with whatever consortium forces are available, and try to establish a defense." Madam President, we're not officially allied with the consortium. Some of their member species are actively rebelling against their authority. Then we'll work with the rebels too. This threat is bigger than politics. When Admiral Collins arrived at the galactic core with a small fleet of human ships, she found chaos. The hegemony had destroyed 3 consortium battle groups and was systematically eliminating the research stations. Their ships moved through space like ghosts, appearing just long enough to fire devastating weapons before disappearing again. The consortium commanders were trying to fight using traditional tactics, forming battle lines, and exchanging fire with an enemy they could barely see. It wasn't working. This is Admiral Collins of the Earth Defense Force. She broadcast on all frequencies. I'm taking command of the defense. You have no authority here, human, replied Admiral Kolvash angrily. I have ships that are still intact and crews that are still alive, Collins replied. That gives me all the authority I need. Her first order surprised everyone. Instead of forming a battle line, she scattered the surviving ships across a wide area and told them to stop fighting. Admiral, what are you doing? Asked Captain Jackson from his damaged research vessel. Adapting, Collins replied. We can't beat them with superior firepower, so we need to find a different approach. She had noticed something that the consortium commanders had missed. The hegemony ships always appeared in the same spots relative to their targets. They were using some kind of dimensional anchor system that required precise positioning. All ships implement random movement patterns, she ordered. Don't try to fight them. Just avoid being where they expect you to be. It worked. The hegemony ships began missing their targets as the human and alien vessels moved unpredictably through space. But Collins knew this was only a temporary solution. The real breakthrough came when Sergeant Tim Roberts, a human engineer working on one of the damaged consortium ships, made an observation that would change everything. Admiral, I've been studying the wreckage from their attacks, he reported. Their weapons don't actually destroy matter. They displace it to another dimension. That means the matter still exists somewhere. What are you thinking, Sergeant? What if we could redirect their weapons? Instead of letting them displace our ships, what if we could displace their attacks to somewhere useful? Collins understood immediately. You want to turn their weapons into terraforming tools. Exactly. And I think I know how to do it. Working with refugees from the destroyed research stations, Roberts developed a plan that seemed impossible to the alien commanders. Instead of trying to stop the hegemony attacks, they would redirect them to dead worlds throughout the system, using the dimensional displacement effect to instantly transform barren planets into habitable worlds. The plan required unprecedented cooperation between dozens of different species. Humans provided the adaptive technology. Korath warriors followed human tactical leadership. Veltai scholars worked with human engineers to modify alien equipment. Even flux entities contributed their knowledge of dimensional manipulation. 4. The first time in galactic history, species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working as equals toward a common goal. The rigid hierarchy of the consortium was replaced by something new, a cooperative network where every species contributed their unique strengths. When the hegemony launched their final assault, expecting to find a broken and demoralized enemy, they instead encountered something they had never faced before. Their weapons, which had destroyed previous galactic civilizations, were turned against them. Every shot they fired created new worlds instead of destroying existing ones. The hegemony commander, War Chancellor Thexvor, found his fleet surrounded, not by enemy warships but by newly created garden worlds teeming with life. His weapons had become tools of creation rather than destruction. How is this possible? He demanded over the communication channels. Admiral Collins answered him personally. It's possible because we stopped thinking about this as a war and started thinking about it as a problem to be solved. Your weapons are incredibly powerful. We just found a better use for them. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with something unprecedented in galactic history. War Chancellor Thexvor requested a meeting with the human admiral, who had turned his greatest weapons into instruments of peace. As the two fleets faced each other across space filled with new worlds that had been born from the energy of weapons designed to destroy, it became clear that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The old ways of thinking about conflict, about hierarchy, about the relationship be 5 years, had passed since the battle at the galactic core changed everything. Captain Jason Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Unity, watching his crew work together in perfect harmony. Around him, beings from over 30 different species shared duties that once would have been impossible to imagine. Lieutenant Vexitar, a young Korath who had grown up after the war, operated the navigation systems alongside Engineer Chen Wei from Earth. At the science station, Dr. Yelnathi worked with Dr. Maria Santos to analyze data from regions of space that had never been explored before. Even flux entity Zerian had taken on a permanent form to serve as the ship's energy systems coordinator. "Captain, we're approaching the Andromeda contact zone," reported Vextar. "The probe signals are getting stronger." Jason smiled. The Unity was part of the Infinity Project, humanity's most ambitious undertaking yet. Working with alien partners, they had built ships capable of traveling not just between star systems, but between entire galaxies. Their mission was to make contact with whatever civilizations existed in the neighboring galaxy of Andromeda. "Take us out of faster-than-light travel," Jason ordered. "Let's see what's waiting for us." The main screen showed a sight that took everyone's breath away. Hanging in space before them was a structure larger than most moons. It was clearly artificial, built by someone with technology that made even the advanced hegemony ships look primitive. But unlike the dark, threatening appearance of hegemony vessels, this structure seemed to welcome visitors with surfaces that glowed with warm, friendly light. "We're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "It's in a language our computers don't recognize, but the mathematical patterns suggest peaceful intentions." Before Jason could respond, the transmission changed. Suddenly they were hearing perfect English, followed by perfect Korath, then Veltai, and finally the harmonic frequencies that flux entities use to communicate. "Welcome, travelers from the Milky Way," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We have been waiting for you for a very long time. Back in the Milky Way galaxy, the changes that had started with humanity's arrival were now complete." Dr. Linda Foster walked through the corridors of the Galactic University, a massive space station where beings from every known species came to learn and teach. The university was located in what had once been the consortium capital, but everything about it was different now. Instead of the cold, imposing architecture designed to show power, the new structure was built for cooperation and growth. Students and teachers from hundreds of different worlds shared knowledge freely, creating discoveries that none of them could have made alone. "Professor Foster, the new class is ready for you," said her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Kolvar, whose crystal skin shifted colors with excitement. Linda entered the classroom and looked out at her students. There were humans and Korath, Veltai, and reformed hegemony survivors, plus dozens of species that had only recently joined the galactic community. All of them were here to learn about something that had revolutionized galactic civilization: cooperative problem-solving. "Today we're going to study the Battle of the Galactic Core," Linda began. "Can anyone tell me why this battle was different from every other conflict in recorded galactic history?" A Korath student raised her hand. "Because nobody tried to destroy their enemies. Instead, they found a way to turn the enemy's weapons into something helpful." "Exactly," Linda replied. "And what made that possible?" a human student answered. "Different species working together instead of fighting each other. Each group brought their own strengths to solve parts of the problem." Linda nodded. "The old way of thinking said that conflict was about winning or losing. The new way says that conflict is about finding solutions that help everyone. This is what we call the human approach, but it's not just for humans anymore." Meanwhile, on what had once been the hegemony homeworld, General Alan Scott was meeting with War Chancellor Thexfor. The former enemy leader had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after his people learned that cooperation could accomplish more than conquest. "General Scott, my people are having difficulty adjusting to the new ways," Thexfor admitted. "For thousands of years we were taught that strength comes from dominating others. Now you tell us that strength comes from helping others. It's not easy to change thinking that has been in place for so long," Alan replied. But look at what your people have accomplished in just 5 years. He gestured to the window, which showed the hegemony homeworld as it existed now. What had once been a fortress planet covered with weapons factories was now a garden world where former warriors worked alongside beings from across the galaxy to develop new technologies for peaceful exploration. Your people didn't lose their strength when they stopped fighting, Alan continued. They found new ways to use that strength. Hegemony engineering combined with human adaptability has created some of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Thexfor looked thoughtful. It is still difficult for some of my commanders to understand. They ask me why we should help species that we once considered enemies. And what do you tell them? I tell them to look at the garden worlds that were created from our weapons. I tell them that creation is a greater victory than destruction. But mostly I tell them to look at their children. Alan knew what he meant. The younger generation of every species in the galaxy was growing up differently than their parents had. They saw cooperation as normal, diversity as strength, and problems as opportunities to create something new. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell stood before the first truly representative galactic assembly, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their military power or economic influence. The Great Hall was filled with beings that would have been enemies just a few years ago, now working together to plan the future of their galaxy. 5 years ago, humanity made first contact with galactic civilization, Sarah began her speech. We were offered a place in an existing order, a role in someone else's system. Today, we're all part of something completely new. She gestured to the assembled delegates. This assembly represents over 200 different species, each bringing their own perspectives and abilities to our shared challenges. We've proven that diversity isn't a source of conflict, it's our greatest strength. A Veltide delegate raised a tentacle. Ambassador Mitchell, what happens when we encounter the next crisis? How do we know this new system will survive future challenges? Sarah smiled. Because this system is built on adaptation rather than control. When new challenges arise, we don't try to force them to fit old solutions. We create new solutions. That's what kept humanity growing on Earth, and it's what will keep our galactic civilization growing as we expand to other galaxies. The speech was interrupted by an urgent message from Captain Jason Reed and the Infinity Project. His image appeared on the main screen, with the mysterious Andromeda structure visible in the background. Assembly members, we've made contact with a civilization in the Andromeda galaxy, Jason reported. They call themselves the Gardeners, and they've been waiting for us to develop the ability to travel between galaxies. The lead gardener, a being that looked like it was made from living light, appeared on the screen next to Jason. People of the Milky Way, the gardener said, we have watched your recent transformation with great interest. You are the first galactic civilization we have encountered that learned to grow through cooperation rather than collapse through conflict. Sarah felt a chill of excitement. Are you saying there are other galaxies with intelligent life? Millions of them, the gardener replied. But most civilizations never develop beyond their home galaxy because they cannot learn to work together. Your species has shown the galaxy a new way to think about cooperation. Now you're ready to join a much larger community. The Assembly Hall erupted in excited discussion as representatives from hundreds of species realized that their galaxy's transformation was just the beginning of an even greater journey. President William Carter watched the news from his office in Washington, with Earth's sun setting outside his window. He thought about how much had changed since Commander Jake Morrison first encountered the Zephyrian delegation. Back then, humanity had been facing the choice between independence and submission to an alien empire. Now, they were part of something bigger than anyone had imagined, a galactic civilization that was growing and learning instead of stagnating and declining. And beyond that, they were about to become part of an intergalactic community that spanned the entire universe. In parks, around Earth, children from dozens of different species played together, learning languages that incorporated ideas from every known civilization. They spoke of futures that their parents could never have imagined, of worlds to explore and problems to solve and discoveries to make. As Carter watched the sunset, he realized that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy hadn't been their technology. or their military innovations. It had been their willingness to believe that things could always be better than they were, that every problem was an opportunity to create something new, and that cooperation could accomplish more than any species.